Hi, I'm Erinn Maxwell. I'm a contemporary and historical romance author who writes stories about love, grief, and the courage it takes to face what we would rather avoid. I write for women who have loved deeply, lost something that has changed them, whether that's a person, relationship, or a version of themselves, and who are learning that softness and strength can coexist. I'm really honored to be here and to talk about the heart behind my story of Heather and Thistle.
Welcome to the Love Letters and Books podcast, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. This is a soft space to explore romance in books, where no topic is too taboo. I'm your host, Casey, and this week, I am sitting down with author Erinn Maxwell to discuss her powerful debut novel of Heather and Thistle. This book is a slow burn, small-town romance about second chances, self-discovery, a hot Scot, and the unexpected places we find home. And I just want to say something before we get started, and you'll hear me mention it throughout the episode. This book really hit home for me. And if you recognize yourself in the pages of Erin's story, if you've ever had to navigate grief, a loved one dealing with substance use disorder, or you yourself identify as an adult child of an alcoholic, I just want you to know that I am so glad you found this episode. Erin, welcome to the Love Letters and Books podcast. I am so glad you're here.
I am so happy to be here, Casey. Thank you for having me.
Erin, I am so excited that you're joining me for this conversation. When I first picked up your book of Heather and Thistle, I honestly did not know what to expect. Yes, it's a romance, and I knew it was set in Scotland. There was just these little tidbits of it, but I had no idea the depth, the weight, the excitement, the learning, all of the things that would come up in this book. So I just want to touch on that for a moment because, yes, it's a romance, but it has all of these other aspects to it.
Yes, it's multifaceted. It's a romance. It's a grief journey. It's got some fun tropes, the grumpy sunshine that we all love. It's a story of a young woman finding herself and learning to love herself while also being open to being loved by other people. And it's funny. It's relatable. It can be cringy at times, confronting with some of the embarrassing things that we might have done in our lives. My biggest hope is that readers will see that it's deeply relatable, it's painfully truthful, painfully funny, and that we can learn to laugh at ourselves, to love ourselves, be kind to ourselves, and that you're worthy from the get-go of love, loving yourself, and receiving it as well.
And it's sweet and spicy and has a hot Scot. So when you
It's
think about
true.
that, the book,
It does.
that is
does.
true. It does. It has all of those things as well. And yet at the same time, we are on this big journey, like an internal journey, but an external journey as well. So I'm really excited to dive in and talk about this today.
Me too.
I picked up your book, and as I sometimes do with books, I almost kind of go into them without looking too much into it. I like to just open the book, kind of dive right in, not read too much of the background. But in the very first pages of your book, I was like, oh, she knows me. Like, oh, okay. And that's where I really want to just drop into this episode today, because I feel like this discussion is going to go so far beyond books. We're talking about real human relatable experiences, people seeing themselves on the page in a challenging way, a good way, a beautiful way. So with that buildup, I would love to just dive in and begin talking about your book. Can you give us a little overview of Heather and Thistle?
Yeah. Of Heather and Thistle follows the story of our heroine, Heather Mackenzie Campbell, and she is navigating grief. And the grief that she's navigating is she had unfortunately lost her mom when she was a child, and she ends up losing her dad to alcoholism. And The way it opens is she's at her father's funeral and she's untangling all of her feelings and all of the layered nuance that goes along with losing someone close to you, even though the relationship was not a healthy one. And she, through the story, is learning how to reclaim her agency and love herself. And in that, we find out that we have a house in Scotland that has been left to us by our late mother, and decide to go there. And we find that the house is in complete disarray. And we end up falling in love in the process, despite our reluctance to do so. And love doesn't save us in this story. We save ourselves, and love is just a beautiful accompaniment to that. So the story is basically just a love letter to loss and what beautiful things can come from that. It is multifaceted. I want people to know, though, too, that it's not so heavy all the time, that there's joy and there's humor and that there's fun and that there's spice, and that we're not just here for the boohoos, we're here for a good time also.
Well, I appreciate you giving the overview. And last night, I was telling my partner what I was doing today, and I was describing the plot of the book. And he was like, well, that's basically my dream. We get a castle in Scotland that someone leaves to us. I feel like 90% of our DMs on Instagram are just him like emailing me properties exactly like that. So he loved this story and he loved what I was talking about. And it was deeper than that. So I'm kind of like joking, being like, oh, yeah, we love the idea of the castle in Scotland. But it was the deeper themes that came up in the book that we were discussing because they were very relatable to us. And while you can see those stories being the adult child of an alcoholic or substance use or some kind of ism in, a textbook or a self-help book, it's quite different when you see it on the page and it's fiction and you can really immerse yourself in it. And it's not that really brutal mirror sometimes. It's actually a much gentler one. And so as we begin this story, we're meeting our main character in this profound moment of grief. But as you and I touched on in the pre-production call, when you're in a situation like this, growing up in a family like this, a lot of the grief begins before the actual loss. And it can be challenging to accept as someone who's experiencing it. You just want to be fine. You want to be tough. You want to be on top of it. You want to do all the things to make your life livable. And then to kind of face that and have that moment where you do lose the person, you realize you've been grieving them this whole time. So, it's a love story, but I like that you are kind of opening this discussion with the discussion of grief and loss. And I want to drop into that space for anyone who's listening who right off the bat was like, oh, what does that mean? Right? Like, what does that mean to love a family member who's struggling with this and to sort of lose them before you lose them? Do you feel like you could share just a little bit about that and, what you're trying to bring into the story specifically about that?
Yeah. Grief is so layered and so nuanced in the specific nature of the loss of a parent through alcoholism. Those who have been through it have noticed that they lost the essence of that person far before they actually left the flesh. And there's a few examples of that, a few flashbacks that Heather has in the story about how the father that she once knew and loved, the joyful, wonderful, beautiful man, became a shell of himself through his own grief. And so the grief themes of Heather and Thistle span beyond death. There's the loss of emotional safety and the loss of identity, the loss of friendships and relationships that were once really important to us, the grief of walking away and starting over again, because you get comfortable in your own space, even if it's a unhealthy, toxic space, and leaving that is very, very challenging. And I also want to normalize non-death grief as well, because there's so many forms of it. The death of a parent is a huge theme in this story, but we can experience grief in many different ways. And I think that that's important to highlight, that while the story it explores themes of death, I want to make it very clear that it's not always so doom and gloom and so sad.
Mm.
That there's so much to learn out of losing not only people, but bits of ourselves that we thought that we would always have.
Well, I really appreciate you dropping to this space so that we can have this discussion, because your book had so much to it that I almost don't want to leave any part of it out. Because yes, we're talking about the grief and, growing up in the household and the effect that has on you, how it shifts how you perceive the world and yourself. And your main character shared a lot of that with us, like in a very vulnerable way. And I feel like that's something that until you actually hear someone say those things of like, I kind of wanted to be invisible, or I wanted to be exactly what everyone else wanted me to be, or I wanted to be less, all of those things that people could look at us from the outside and not know that we're feeling that way on the insides. Right.
Yeah.
And that's very much indicative of living in a home like that, or loving someone who's navigating substance use disorder.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, you're talking about all the other relationships in the book and how, I really, and like, I'm trying to be very, I'm going to back up for a second. I think I'm like so excited that I can't even get words out. Good problem. But,
That's a good problem to have. Thank you.
it's a great problem to have, right? Like, I love this book so much, and I take the topic so seriously that I think I'm almost like fumbling, because I'm like, oh my God, we have so much to talk about. But I was also thinking about all of the other relationships in the book. I feel like you did a lot of inner world building by sharing the dynamics that were going on around this person. And we're seeing how it's not just, oh, I had a complicated relationship with my dad, and when he passes, it ends. It's like, no, it touches all of these other relationships. And I have this opportunity to grow and move through it and open myself up. And it's so challenging. So if you're open to it, I would love to touch on some of the other relationships in the book, because the girlfriend, like the best friend relationship, really stood out to me. Oh, let's talk about it, please.
Yes, please. That one is a doozy, and I feel it's so relatable. I feel like all of us have had an Ivy in our life. Or we might have been an Ivy at some point in time. You never know.
It was interesting to see how someone who grows up in a home spending so much time almost being invisible can then be in relationships and almost feel invisible, or not being seen as a unique individual, right? There's a lot that goes on when we grow up in homes with isms. And there's a lot of enmeshment, a lot of invisibility, and a lot of control issues come up. And so it's not like we're going to walk into the world and immediately know how to navigate friendships or intimate partnerships. Like, we're going to have a lot of learning that goes on. It's uncomfortable. And close female friendships, that is such an intense dynamic, right? You reveal so much, you show up so much, you learn so much. And then when someone hurts you in some way, it hurts so much. And I just thought it was really beautiful how in this story, yes, it's a romance. And I don't want to get away from that, because we actually haven't touched on that yet. But it is a romance. There's this beautiful romance going on in the story. But we have a fully formed character who's moving through the world. And I really feel like is learning a lot of lessons about all the relationships in their life, and how they were raised maybe impacted that. And they have opportunities to make different choices, like a counterintuitive action. Right. You had mentioned something earlier of like the familiarity of living in a home like that, or with a loved one who you have this very like locked in cycle between the two of you. And it feels really familiar, and it feels really safe because you know it, even if it's harming you.
Yeah.
So, I don't think I'm giving too much away. I'm not giving details. What I'm saying, I'm just talking about the emotions in the relationship.
Yeah. I think that we've all been touched by toxic friendships as women. The deal with Ivy and Heather is that Ivy was the kind of person that Heather needed for a time. She was safety when she was feeling unsafe. She was the sunshine in what was a very bleak gloomy place for Heather growing up. She was what helped her break out of her shell in some ways and learn how to navigate friendships and social situations. At the same time, being a less out there person, having a more quiet personality, being more of a follower instead of a leader, it's easy to be stepped on. And that kind of stuff happens over time. And especially in a case with somebody like Heather in the story, or if a person in real life maybe comes from a background of being stepped on or not having much control in their personal life, it's hard to be able to learn how to pull that control in, especially as, in a childhood friendship. And then in a young adult friendship, also, it's hard to stick up for yourself. It's hard to also know exactly what you need until you do re-examining in your life, and realizing that sometimes we have people in our lives for a season and they did well for us in that season and we did well for them, but every season ends. And whether or not you carry certain people or certain situations into the next season of your life, it's anyone's guess.
I love that the topic surfaced in the book, because I do also think when you are the adult child of an alcoholic, I feel like there's a lot of rigidity baked into that. And it can be very difficult to get out of routines because substance use disorder by nature is quite rigid. Believe it or not, I think people think it's not. It actually very much is.
Yeah.
And so that kind of seeps into a lot of the relationships and the idea of I'm allowed to grow, I'm allowed to change, I'm allowed to want something different. I'm allowed to not be what you need to be most convenient so you can be the worst version of you. Like all
Yeah.
of those things come to the surface. And I just really thought it was so beautiful to read that it wasn't just one person in this character's life. And they were kind of examining everything through this lens, through like a new pair of glasses, saying like, I've had this experience, I'm going through loss, and now I'm seeing things a little bit differently. And yeah, no, I love touching on that because I do think like those close female friendships, I would love if they were actually explored more in books and the impact that they have on us. So I just love that that was in there, and the reality of the growth of the characters really stood out to me, where the growth just felt very authentic. Sorry, I don't know if that's like making sense as I'm saying it, but
No,
I'm
it
just like,
makes
there were
absolute
not
sense.
these like lightning moments. It was
Mhm.
growth, and the growth is a little uncomfortable. And then you kind of go back to it, trying to do it differently. And then you do the same thing you used to do. And it just felt very true. So somebody could open this book and really feel safe in their own mistakes in your story.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I really wanted this book to be a gentle place, a gentle mirror, a gentle reflection to so many of the experiences that young women face. Whether or not you've lost a parent or somebody close to you in the physical sense, we've all gone through loss, whether that's a person, a place, an idea, our sense of self. I really wanted it to be a gentle place where you could inject yourself into Heather's shoes and feel seen and feel loved and to see the interior world. I know that a lot of romance novels are written in first person POV these days, and my book is in third person. That was a choice I made because I wanted everyone to see the holistic picture of who Heather is, not just in her interior world, but in her exterior world as well. I wanted people to see her holistically and know why she was the way she was and what her outside world was and the people around her and the things that were dictating her life around her, so that we really get a clear picture on who this person is. And I think that that's why she's been so great for so many people, is that we have that bird's eye view on her. And it's not just her interior, but it's her exterior as well.
You know what's coming up for me as we're talking right now, because I actually really want to dive into what you just said, is that the topic hits so close to home that I'm feeling like actually nervous talking to you. And that doesn't usually happen. No, it's good. I mean, why not talk about it? Whatever.
Yeah,
This is what we do
absolutely.
on the podcast. But I think I just took it so seriously because you shared this world and this experience that I know very well, and you shared it so beautifully on the page, and I was just feeling like, oh yeah, I guess that's where that nervousness is coming from in our discussion, because you're so lovely and easy to talk to. And I was like, why am I fumbling? And I was like, oh, because I feel really emotional about it. And I just thought that, gosh, I've read tons of textbooks throughout my career, but also like in my personal journey through this about these things, but I very rarely read fiction about it. And I just felt like, oh, what a soft way to be seen. So I'm going to pull back from being self conscious. And I would love to touch on some other things that I noticed in your writing, specifically, pulling on the thread of what you just said. There was this moment where we're watching our main character do something nice for herself. And someone could not relate to this, but I'm just going to tell you, as someone who does relate to this, it was when she was buying herself clothes and doing things that she really wanted for herself. And just the way that you approach that, it just was so real. The struggle when I guess the word is deprivation, is a key feature of being raised in an alcoholic home. Like, you just feel like you deserve less than. You just feel like I shouldn't get something when I want it, and I shouldn't even get something when I need it. I just need to get something in an emergency. And like, it was so beautiful to watch this character have these experiences where she's doing things for herself, just to be kind to herself, just so she feels good in her body, so she feels good in the world. And what a challenging but freeing experience that is. And it was even hard to read on the page. So I think that I wanted to highlight that as someone who I personally very much struggle with that as well. Is feeling called out, but called in like the most gentle way possible. And I was like, man, this Erinn Maxwell knows what she's talking about.
It's
Which is exactly what I would have a hard time with, is specifically this. And it can sound silly, right? It can sound like nuance, but it wasn't, because it was in the book. And again, I would also like to point out, as we're talking about POV, distorted perception is something in like the clinical sense that comes up a lot when you talk about being an adult child of alcoholics. Like, the world looks different to you, and it's not always true. Like, your perception is not always spot on. So I think it's really interesting to choose to write in third person POV, so that, we might have an unreliable narrator. And in this case, we got to actually be along her journey with her and see all sides of it. So I feel like I just threw a lot at you, but
yeah, I feel like the choice that Heather made in that moment to purchase a new wardrobe for herself, it was a quiet but profound act of self-love and self-care. And I think that when you are steeped into an environment that is not focused on you, and that is not focused on your comfort, and that is not conducive to your well-being, you get used to being okay with being a feature in your own life, not being the main character. And for Heather, I thought it was important to give her, because she goes through the ups and downs in the story. Just, she mirrors real life, which is what I wanted her to be. I wanted her to feel real, and I wanted us to see her have this tiny win of making this seemingly boring choice for herself, because there's a lot of people. Treat yourself, right? Everybody, that's the whole thing these days, is treat yourself. But what about the people who have never treated themselves? What about the people where this is a new thing, where this is a scary thing, where this is representative of turning over a new leaf and embarking on a new journey? Buying a pair of matching underwear is a huge thing that she's really excited about in this story. So I think that it's just for Heather, it feels like a bold declaration of, I'm starting over, and I'm choosing to love myself through it.
yeah. No, you were just kind of jumping off the page, and I was like, God, she sees everything. Like I just think about even like it can sound silly and I have no problem being vulnerable, but it's so hard for me to upgrade anything, to buy anything because there's just this pervasive thought that's just sort of baked into you that you don't sort of deserve it or you're not special enough to have something of your own. So even just like the matching panty set, like I know that sounds so silly and somebody could be like, what do you mean? And it's like, no, but to feel like I'm my own person, I'm my own grown woman. I don't have to be this invisible sidekick to someone else and just be hyper vigilant about what they want. Like I can just do this for me, if no one else sees it, it's mine. And I
Exactly.
think that that will really, really resonate with a lot of people. And throughout the story, I thought it was always so interesting because I felt like you were highlighting this specific phenomenon that happens in these situations where there's almost the assumption, and it's totally wrong, by the way, I'll just share that with everyone, that when a moment of crisis passes, that everything will be fine. Like if you've had a challenging relationship with someone and that person is no longer in your life, you'll be fine. If you were taking care of someone and they pass away and you're no longer under that strain, now you'll be fine. It's like, no, it takes up a lot of space even in their absence because you're no longer having to be hyper vigilant about them. And it's almost like you're left with the feelings, you're left with the aftermath, and you have to pick up your own pieces. And it can be a really powerful mirror when something nice happens. And that can almost be challenging to understand, right? One might think, oh, well, when a catastrophe happens, then you'll fall apart. It's like, no, we're built for catastrophe. When we've grown up in these households where we never know what's happening next, I'm great in emergencies. I have a really hard time when people are just like gentle and nice with me. And I saw that in your character where she's having to learn about that part of herself and have that growth, which is so beautiful, so challenging. So, can you touch on that a little bit? That confusion around, when the good thing has happened, why are we all of a sudden falling apart?
Yeah, yeah. Self-sabotage is real, isn't it? When you grow up or when you're steeped in that culture of coming last for everything or taking care of everybody else's needs, when you have never known how to take care of your own needs or even thinking that you even have them because you're there to serve other people. When somebody does something nice for you or when something good happens, you almost don't know what to do with it because you weren't trained for this. Yeah, I wasn't like it's like saying I wasn't trained for the good stuff. I was trained for the emergency. I was trained for the adrenaline. I was trained for managing and surviving in a grief-stricken world. And now that I'm being offered something beautiful or something kind or something gentle, you almost don't know how to hold it. It's like being used to having a giant dog that is in your face, sometimes aggressive, kind of slobbery, and just kind of hard to manage, a large thing. And then you're given a little bluebird. What do you do with it? How do I hold it? I don't want to hurt it. So maybe I should just give it back because I'm not meant for the bluebird. I'm meant for the German Shepherd. You know what I mean?
Oh, that was such a good example. And again, it kind of goes back to the rigidity and how we're almost taught to limit ourselves because we're almost trained in that environment to not want more, expect more, desire more, feel like we have capacity for more because we're a resource sometimes to the other person in our life. And so that is really beautiful when you're looking at it like that of how do I hold this thing and how do I deal with all the feelings that come up because that makes me feel self-conscious and maybe ashamed that I'm not skilled at this and I can watch everyone else do it and they look like they're having a great time and I'm in a full panic mode because someone did something nice for me and I don't want to be that person. But
Yeah. Yeah, you
I
don't know
you
how to
know
hold
I
it sometimes.
oh wow. I feel like this book is an invitation for a lot of self-grace where we can be really harsh with ourselves about, not getting it yet or not being where everyone else is or where we imagine everyone else is. I felt like it was just really bringing the reader into awareness that we do get to have a journey. Like your character's on an actual physical journey, right? She's
Mhm.
leaving a job, she's going somewhere else, she's starting a new life. But when you think about just the inner journey that people don't even allow themselves to go on, right? Like she had
Mhm.
all of these obstacles in her journey. But think about what it's like when you're not breaking out of your routine, you're in your daily life and you're still going through these emotions, or you want to grow, or you want to change. And
Mhm.
yeah, it can be really challenging. And then you throw in the romance, and man, does that get challenging?
Oh
I'm
my
joking, but
gosh.
at the same time,
Yeah,
it's like
it does though.
I worked it does. I worked with a guy named Ed once, and he told me, he was a practitioner at the cancer center I ran, and he told me that when love walks in the room, it just makes you think of everything that love is not. Because love is forgetting, it's ease in a lot of ways. And he's not saying
Mhm.
relationships are supposed to be easy,
No.
but it's not supposed to be the hypervigilance. And so
Mhm.
when you've gone without love and you find love walking into your life, it just reminds you of the way you didn't have it. All the
Yeah.
times you went without it, when you thought you weren't worthy of it or you didn't deserve it. And it can be really confronting. And our brains don't work that way. Our brain isn't like, Casey, it's really confronting today. You really need to deal with it. Instead, you're just like, no, I'd like to sabotage this, please,
Yeah,
because I
no, here,
really
take it
want
back.
to.
Yeah. Take
I
it back.
really want to make sure my abandonment wound gets its due. And like, and you brought up self-sabotage, and I'm touching on abandonment because those two things are so closely related. If we feel like we've had that history of abandonment, self-sabotaging is a great way to make sure that that cycle repeats. And it's really challenging to look at because we want to think, God, I would never do that to myself. I want nice things. I would never set myself up to fail. And it's like, no, it's a skill and it's a muscle and we have to like work it, right? Like we're both making
Yeah.
faces as we're talking about it. No one can see it, but we're both like, yeah, it's kind of cringy, but you
No.
have to work on it a little
Right.
bit.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this super easy romance that happens in your book where nothing goes wrong. There's no struggle.
Nothing goes wrong at all. The end. Everybody's happy.
Exactly. That's why I love
They
this
all
book
live,
so much.
yeah, we all lived happily ever after and everything's great. Let's go get drinks.
Yeah. Well, so what actually happens? And you don't have to give too many details away, but like it's a journey, right? The romance itself is a journey.
Yeah. So the male main character, our romantic interest, his name is Flynn Duncan. And he is basically everything that Heather is not. He's self-assured, he's steady, he's hot, he's Scottish, he's kind, he's gentle, he's all of the things that make Heather aloof, that make somebody who isn't used to being interacted with that way, who's used to harshness, who's used to nothing kind, who's just used to getting the short end of the stick. Flynn represents safety and steadiness and choice in a world where Heather has only known fear and unease and discomfort. And that's really confronting for her. She's never been looked at as somebody who is appealing or who is interesting or who has something to say or anything like that. She really lives in the shadow of not only her toxic friendship that she left behind, which let's just say, like, the way she left it behind and the reason why she left it behind is just intense and wild. The
So
betrayal,
toxic.
so toxic.
I'm not going to give anything away, but deeply toxic, deeply
Yeah.
toxic. But it
Yeah.
was so helpful in the book because those things happen, to be honest, and it was
They
just really
do.
nice to see on a page. So I don't mean to interrupt you too much, but
No.
yes, that was
No, yeah.
wildly
Yeah.
toxic, and then to find love after that was just oof.
Yeah, it's so unlikely. You wouldn't think. I think it's the emotional whiplash of
Mhm.
Heather feeling leaving behind her old life, leaving her job that she loved, leaving behind her comfort zone of the house and the life that she built for herself after the loss of her parent and having the comfort in that and going into the complete unknown. And the meet cute that happens between Heather and Flynn is just one of my favorite things ever. And oh my gosh, I would love to divulge like what happens, but I want you to read it. Let's just say
It's a good
that
one.
they meet. Yeah,
Everyone's gonna read it.
yeah. Let's just say Scotland is really rainy and we all know it. And somebody's car may or may not have broken down. And some beautiful Scottish man helps Heather and they fall in love.
And we're, like, laughing about it, but there were so many just beautiful things that he brought to that relationship, so I'm, like, kinda giggly about it because I'm like, "Oh, everyone has to read it to actually see the meet cute in their relationship." But it was also very interesting what he brought, and
Mhm.
I thought, "Wow, those are some of the most confronting things for someone who's been in survival mode and in invisibility mode." I mean, right off the bat, this is a man who creates comfort and safety. And when you have been living with someone who offers the exact opposite, that can feel really, I don't know, you know what? I don't even know what the word is that I would
Jarring,
use, but it's
you
almost
know?
jarring, right?
Mhm.
You almost feel like I'm being tricked in some way. Like, what is happening right now? And here's this person just truly being who they are and doing things that are most natural for them. And it is just, you're almost caught up in how different it is for you. And then
Mhm.
there's that learning that has to happen of like, I need to be able to learn how to receive. And that's something that doesn't get spoken about a lot. It's almost like we feel like we're all naturally programmed to do that with grace and elegance. And it's like,
Mhm.
absolutely not. Some of us really struggle with it. And we actually get to learn about that. And it's a bit of an uncomfortable journey at times of maybe reflecting on moments when we haven't received with grace, or we've made someone feel bad because they were nice to us, because
Yeah.
we were uncomfortable receiving. And what do we do in those relationships, right? And it's interesting how graceful we can be about being ignored, not having our needs met. Like we can be quiet and easygoing about that. And then someone does something nice, and that's where we have the
Hold on
struggle.
there. Yeah.
So yeah, like, "What are you doing?" Or, "Why are you trying to trick me?" But,
Why are you being so nice to
yeah,
me?
no,
It's
I
weird. Yeah.
and maybe that sort of self-accounting that we do when we're like, "Did I earn this? Did
Yes.
I do something to deserve this?" Without realizing that maybe this is this other person's baseline. Maybe they are just a consistently kind person, and it's not a reward system. They're not doing it because we have to be extra special, and that is mind-blowing. So I also
Yes.
know for anyone listening who might be like, how do you not know this? It's like, no, we're all on different emotional journeys. And, even in adulthood, this stuff can
Yeah.
be really challenging when it comes up. And that's why I wanted to highlight it because it might be very unconscious and automatic for us. Like we're not realizing that we're searching for what did I do to earn this? Like
Yeah.
our hypervigilance that we used to use to protect ourselves in situations then gets used to kind of push people away and double check their work. And they're just like living their lives and loving us.
Mhm. Yeah. I feel oftentimes we don't feel like we deserve love if we didn't put in a graphable index of what we did to deserve it. And for those of you who have been loved not maybe not romantically or even by like a parent, because in this situation Heather doesn't know the familial love. She didn't grow up in a loving home, and so she didn't really grow up in a healthy loving friendship either. So I want everybody to know that you're worthy of a love in any capacity that meets you where you're at and doesn't ask you to perform for it. So
Let's just sit with that for a moment. The love that doesn't ask you to perform for it. And I think that just really hits home again because we can go our whole lives and not realize that we've been doing that and that people have been asking or demanding it of us. And bringing some awareness to that is so beautiful. It just opens our life up in so many ways because, right, Heather's story could have gone either way. She could have been very rigid in her belief of certain things and gone in one direction. And instead, she's opening herself up to the possibilities. And I feel like for the people who, like me, who have a similar story in our own way of growing up in that type of household, I really hope that they open your book and get to experience those moments of, I've used the word grace a lot, but also that like energetic exhale where it's like, oh, I didn't even realize I was holding my breath. I didn't even
Yes.
realize that stressed me out. I didn't even realize. Because also, the other thing that you brought up really in the book is just being seen. So when you grow up in a household where you're being asked to be invisible, verbally, non-verbally, like just basically the message is like, you should not be here, to be seen in your life as an adult is really challenging because you just think it's going to be the worst thing ever. Like it's going to be painful. There's going to be consequences. It's going to be horrible. And then to have the opposite experience where you slowly get to come out of your shell and be seen, not performing, like you said, just being who you are. God, that's so beautiful.
And the messy parts, the messy bits that we really want to keep to ourselves, that we think are so unlovable, that we think are just so egregious, oftentimes those are the things that draw people to us most. You know, they feel seen seeing your struggles, and that's something that a lot of the time that you could bond with, you know what I mean, in a healthy way. We like to curate our lives, and we like to present this front of who we would like to be perceived as, and oftentimes it's not true. It's the Instagram effect. There is this curated view of these lovely, beautiful moments that only exist in a millisecond of time. Say you take a picture and you are at a cafe and you're having a beautiful latte and a nice piece of avocado toast. That's a millisecond into your life. And when you have enough of these curated pieces of your life and that's what you present to the world, you start to think that the icky, yucky things and that you feel self-conscious and not so great about, you start to feel that those things nobody feels that way because everybody else is out here living such beautiful full lives when it's quite the opposite. That, you know, we choose to present ourselves in such a way that eliminates discomfort and eliminates struggle, and that's just not true. And when you bring your full self into a relationship, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a romantic relationship, you're giving somebody a gift to see all of those things that you may not like about yourself. You know, it's a gift to be your full self. And like I said before, you're worthy of love that you don't have to perform for, that you don't have to put on airs about. You can wear your sweatpants and you can be just as like uncomfortable and just as you are, you know. It's something that I feel like we don't like to talk about and that we don't like not being perfect. And I know that I don't like being perfect either. But the imperfection is what I think makes all of us so unique and nuanced.
Yeah. I'm so glad we're having this conversation because I know all of us need to hear it, right? And I don't know if you've ever read her, but Nadia Bolz-Weber, she's a writer, she has a podcast, she's done a lot of things. I met her when I was much younger, but she wrote about that a lot. And she was writing about like sort of the cutting room floor of our life. And it's all those scraps that we think that we have to just like sweep away. And that's usually where the connection happens. I have to be honest with you, like the moments in my own life where I had the strongest connection, most profound, transformative connection really did not happen in those moments of performance. It was when I didn't really know what was going on. I was a little uncomfortable. I was a little under-resourced and a little vulnerable, and the and all the things that I would not choose out of a catalog to set
Yeah.
me up for that. But it's always those moments, and in those moments it's because that mask is almost too heavy and I can't hold it. And that's when the truth comes up. And I think it's an interesting thing because I don't want anyone listening to think anyone's pointing fingers at anyone. I'm talking from the I as well in a lot of this. Like I'm on my own growth journey, right? But I think there can be something when you grow up this way, as your main character did, where you're taught to mask, be convenient, be contained, be all of that. You're taught to not have any flaws or anything that would inconvenience anyone or stand out. And then you're almost robbed of that ability to form those close relationships and the intimacy that happens when you are not perfect, the intimacy that happens in relationships when you make a mistake and you have to apologize or you have to reconnect or make amends. And, the word manipulation is so negative, right? We always think of manipulating people is horrible. But I think that there can be that top manipulation of don't show yourself to anyone. And then you deprive yourself of those relationships. And then when you finally do, and that mask is ripped away and you're grieving and you're in a different country and you don't know what's going on and you have all these
Mhm.
things coming your way as your main character did, she almost doesn't have enough hands to hold all the things that she has going on. So she certainly can't hold that mask on. And
Mhm.
that's when the connection happens. That's when the breakthrough happens. So I love that we're talking about this. I loved that you wrote about it. And I want to talk a little bit about your experience of holding that space. Because here we are, right? I mean, I'm sitting here talking to you and I'm telling you, I was actually nervous talking about you about the book because it felt like my first experience outside of like a clinical setting where I'm talking about this with someone. And I just saw parts of me on a page and I was like, oh, you know, and I do this all the time. There's no reason I should be nervous. And you're so delightful. And you and I had a great pre-production call. And here I was, like, still telling you that's the impact your book had on me. And I'm wondering what has been the response or the conversation with readers?
I feel so blessed that I was able to write this story and to be able to give other women Heather. I feel like she's a mirror of what we go through as women. I feel like a lot of the main characters and protagonists in the books that we consume, especially in the contemporary romance genre, I feel like they're lovely. Don't get me wrong. I'm right there with you for the Hallmark lovely pumpkin spice cafe-esque type books. I love them. But I feel like there's a lack of gentle reality and the gentle, quiet kind of love that creeps up on us when we least expect it. I think the biggest compliments that I've gotten is people saying that they feel loved and that they feel seen and they feel supported. And my very favorite review that I've gotten was somebody had said something to the effect of reading this book feels like the advice of like a friend or a sister telling you to love yourself, showing you the arc of a person who you can really relate to, who in the end wins. Because so often we see ourselves in the weeds where we're at and we don't see on the other side of them that there's something waiting for us over there, and it'll take work to get out of the weeds and it'll take time and it'll take persistence, but on the other side over there there's something good waiting for you. And it's been one of the biggest blessings of my life to love women through this because I've been there, and Heather isn't a direct mirror to what my life has been like, but she is everyone. She's every woman who has been touched by loss. She's every woman who's been touched by grief, whether that's emotional loss of emotional safety, loss of physical safety, loss of your identity, loss of friendships, death even. She's a representation of every single woman that I've ever known in my life. And she's a love letter to womankind. And I want everyone to see that even though this is a fictional story, that there is hope and you are lovable just where you are, in spite of all of those things that we want to keep hidden, that you have value and the right person will find it and they will love you for it. But also,
Yeah.
love yourself too. Also, it's not just dependent on what you can bring to the table for other people and other people loving you. The biggest part of the story and what I wanted to drive home is that you don't need love to save you. It's a great addition. It's a beautiful, wonderful thing on its own to be loved and to be known by someone. But to love and to know yourself and to be comfortable with yourself and to realize that you have inherent worth just out of the gate is what's most important.
That message really came through in your writing. And I truly did not know that that was the journey I was on as I opened the book. And I say that on almost every episode that I do really open books and I try to just go in without that bias. I really just want to fall into the story without a preconceived notion. I was unprepared for where you took me, and I'm so grateful that we connected and were able to talk about this. There was one other thing in the book that I thought was really interesting because it was subtle, but it was there where, we're talking about stepping away from not a generational curse, but something that could be repeated, a cycle that's moving through families and very often does. And what that looks like when you are the cycle breaker, when you are doing something different, and it can feel lonely and scary and challenging, and you're uncertain because you're doing something that the people around you were not doing, but it doesn't mean it's wrong. It means that you are on your own journey. Like, you are allowed to have your own experiences, which are very often robbed of us when we're in those very enmeshed or codependent family dynamics where even our invisibility is required of us to remain in this family. So I guess I'm bringing that up because you were also weaving in the story of Heather's mother and her father and the things that they wanted in their lives and how they dealt with grief and maybe their story ending too soon. And what does it look like for the next generation? And I say that because a lot of people listening are in that exact position themselves of, I can be the cycle breaker or I can continue what I know. And just because I'm uncomfortable doesn't mean something's wrong, which was a huge lesson in my own life, by the way. So I'm happy to share. Like, I used to think if I was uncomfortable, it meant something was wrong. And it's like, no, maybe it means everything's okay finally. And you're just uncomfortable with it. So why was that important for you to weave in the multi-generational stories?
I feel like it's important to weave in that background information because as people, we're nuanced. We're a product of our environment. We become what we know. And for Heather, her mom passed away when she was very young. She was a child. Before that, her family was loving. It was basically run of the mill. It's what you would think of when you think of a fictional, lovely family unit. She lived with her mom and her dad. Her parents were deeply in love. They loved her. They had a very healthy home life. And then tragedy strikes. Heather's mom passes away, unfortunately. And Heather's dad, his name is Charles, he spirals. And the woman that he loved, his wife, the mother of his child, passes away in a very unfortunate circumstance. And he's left with their child and their life that he has to go on and carry. And that in itself is frightening, and it's tragic, and it's sad, and it's a testament of what grief can really do to a person. And there's the exploration of, is Charles a bad person? I'd like to think he wasn't. He made some very poor choices, Heather's father. He hurt Heather severely. He was supposed to be there for her. He was supposed to be her dad. He was supposed to love her unconditionally. He was supposed to be that steady presence. But does that make him a villain? I'd like to think not. Charles is representative of somebody in my life that I lost to alcoholism, who was a multifaceted person. He was funny, and he was smart, and he was kind, and life hurt him. So what helped him was to hurt life back. And unfortunately, that happens all the time. So I'd like to give a little bit of grace to people, not excusing poor behavior and toxic and abusive behavior by any means, any stretch of the imagination. Mm-hmm. But I'd also like to offer grace and love to people who might have been an abuser at some point, who healed, whose story continued where Charles didn't, where the person I loved, where their story didn't continue. And I think that that's important too, and being a cycle breaker is often lonely when you are surrounded by people who are comfortable in that cycle, who thrive in chaos, even though someone on the outside would look in and think this isn't thriving, this isn't living. It's what they know. And so the path to healing and the path to cycle breaking usually is not a glorious hero's journey. It's usually painful. It's usually isolating. It's hard. There is reward in it, but there's also a lot of pain. And I think that it's important to highlight that.
I love that you're raising this right now, because I think that it's something that we all ask ourselves when we've had a family member or a loved one who is experiencing this, and they are not the person that we knew them to be. And the entire world can be really loud and say, you should feel this way. This is how you should look at them. This is what you should do. And I had the opposite. I had someone who was very much an abuser, like no regrets. Like that was very much their experience with it. And, you know, to approach the storytelling, offering that person grace and not saying it's black and white, not saying you're a villain, it's saying you're a flawed human being who is on this human journey, and you never got the opportunity to make amends. You know, making amends is very healing for both parties. And to be robbed of that because of time or illness, it's a powerful lesson. It's really powerful for us who survive in the aftermath. You know, we're taught that you don't have forever. Like, you can clean these things up, you can fix them, you can repair relationships and reconcile with people, or take accountability and say, I did something, or have I harmed you in ways that I'm not aware of? You know, we have the opportunity to do that. But I feel like it's an invitation for emotional clarity, maturity, neutrality, like any of those words, instead of just jumping on the bandwagon and saying like, oh, this person is definitely all of this. And I feel like there's that criticism that can come up when specific words are used when we're having discussions around these topics, right? Even the word alcoholism is controversial, right? In certain circles, or, you know, I use substance use disorder, like that can even be controversial. So
Yeah.
it's not saying because I'm using this one word that I'm encompassing all that you are. I'm talking about my experience with you. And I really feel like I felt that coming through the story, where you were sharing someone's pain. They were not enjoying that they were doing this. There was this beautiful scene that you wrote. It was heartbreaking. I'm saying beautiful, but it was heartbreaking to read, where she's just being a little girl and he can't even deal with that. He can't experience her as a little girl. He can't stand it. He can't hear it. He can't have it in his house. It's just too much, because it almost like brings up feelings of like the life that was just taken from me, the loss of my imagined future. And here you are, and how dare we make noise in this house? And I just felt like you did such a beautiful job of inviting us into that space where we could show up, setting down our armor or our judgment, and really meet these characters where they are. And I'm not saying that in a way of like complimenting. I'm saying as a reader, I really appreciated that, because I feel like that's almost a safer way of reading stories than just sort of the black and white. Here's the villain, here's the good guy, because she's on a journey too, and she's going to make mistakes. No one makes more mistakes than the adult child of an alcoholic. I promise you. We are legendary for making mistakes. And so to be in a space where someone could be open-minded when they're reading about your characters, and maybe they're reflecting on it for the first time. I always think about that. The person who reads your book and does not realize that that was the house that they grew up in. And someone can hear me say that and say, what do you mean? They wouldn't realize. That happens more often than you think, where things are normalized for us and we don't realize until it's reflected back at us that, oh, that happened in my house, but that wasn't what everyone else experienced. Like, that's a really challenging moment. I don't know if you ever had that, but
Yeah,
I've had
it
those
doesn't
moments
have
where I
to
was
be.
like,
Yeah.
oh my God.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
substance abuse. It doesn't have to be death. It
Oh,
doesn't have to
definitely
be
not.
it doesn't have to be these, I don't want to say cookie cutter, but it doesn't have to be these set expectations of what grief should be and what it should feel like and what it should represent. So many things there's so many opportunities for trauma and for discomfort and for those wounds to appear in when you're raising children and when you're past that, when you are your own independent person. It's not just about, that's why I wanted to write Heather in a way that felt the death and the alcoholism and everything was the start of her story. It is what started everything. But I wanted to write her in an open-ended way where you could inject yourself into Heather's shoes. That she not only lost parents, but she had lost friendships. She lost her sense of self. She lost her sense of emotional safety. And I want her to feel like you. I want you to stand in her shoes and to feel. And I feel like that's something that we don't necessarily want to do that often when we're reading stories. We want to escape. We want to not look at all of these little parts of ourselves that can kind of be painful. But and I get that, and I'm with you. I wanted to write Heather though as a mirror to show people that it is possible to grow and it is possible to love not only another person in a romantic sense, but yourself. Despite all of those challenging, traumatic, hard events in your life, it's possible to be able to move on, even though you're sitting here in the weeds and thinking that it's not possible. I wanted her to feel like you.
Yeah. What would you say to the person listening who's having maybe a gentle realization about similarities between themselves and what the character was experiencing or the family dynamic?
That I see you and that you have people in your life who see you. You may not recognize it. You may not see it in the moment. You may feel alone. You may feel isolated. And maybe you are. Maybe you are a little isolated. But there are people who care about you. And at the end of the day, I want you to care about you. That you are capable of so much more and that you are worthy of having a better life than what you're experiencing.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I just can almost imagine someone listening, right, who like picks up your book and has this big experience with it. And I'm really glad we took time today to talk about all of these things and touch on some of them and offering a little clarity, right? I was thinking back to my younger self as you were talking, right? Like I'm sitting here with you and I'm thinking, okay, what would I have felt if I had read this book at 20? You know, what would I have felt if I had read this book at different times in my life? And I was thinking about maybe the defensiveness that would have come up when I'm seeing something on a page that I know is me, that I really struggle with accepting that that's me. And I was just thinking about that younger version of self and being like, oh, I just want to like send you so much love that that defensiveness was just you trying to muscle through and just trying to survive because you didn't yet have the skills to thrive, basically. And I'm really glad we've had this conversation and talked about the love for these characters and their very, very human journey. And I think it's not like you explicitly touched on the topic of forgiveness with the previous generation, but I feel like there was a lot of forgiveness in your story. And I felt like it was really interesting because it was almost manifest in this like self-forgiveness of like, gosh, I'm making some mistakes. Gosh, I'm not that good at this yet. Or, oh, I actually want that, but I said this thing. Like, what's wrong with me? And so there was this theme of forgiveness all throughout your book. And yet it didn't have to be that like black and white. You have to forgive your parent for exactly what they did, that they never apologized for, you know? And I just want to say, as someone who, you know, a lot of us will go through things in life and we'll never get an apology. Amends will never be made. That thing will never be healed in that way that we could just tie it up with a bow, but healing will occur and it will occur in our lives in that way. And I'm really grateful that you wrote a book that touched on so many important topics and gave us a romance, gave us a beautiful story, like a beautiful internal romance, because I felt like she was falling in love with herself throughout the story. But then I have a question for you. and this is really important.
Let's hear it.
My goodness, this was your first book?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. You are so brave and inspiring. And I don't know how you're receiving those words. I hope they're like hitting in the way I'm meaning, in that just you just picked such a such a big, bold, relatable, just tender topic for this book. And I'm watching you and I'm thinking like, I'm having a hard time talking about it on the podcast because it means so much to me, right? I had a mental health podcast for a million years. I never struggled talking about it. I'm sitting here with you and I'm like, oh my God, I want to say the right thing. It's like, it means so much to me. And yet here you are. This is your first book. And you're touching on something that is so sensitive and raw and real for so many people. So let's talk about you for a second. What what brought you to that place where you were like, this is the story I'm starting with?
It's a beautiful question. I know what it's like to be a young adult and to feel unlovable. And I may not be Heather in every sense of the word, but like I said before, Heather's a representation of every woman. I would have loved younger me to have been able to read an example of a real success story, a real love story, one that's layered and nuanced, one that is kind of messy, and where the heroine makes mistakes that are like actually real mistakes that we would make. And I wanted to be able to give that to women who need it. I love women. I love my sisters. I love my girlfriends. I love my mom. I love women. And I feel like so often we are taught to shrink ourselves and to be okay with situations that aren't okay and that make us feel poorly about ourselves. And I want women to feel seen, and I want women to feel loved. And you are seen and you are loved. I see you, I hear you, and there's a way out. And it's hard and it's not always comfortable. And it's messy, and you're not going to do the right thing all the time. And that's okay. You're going to get there. It may take time, and you may do some embarrassing things along the way. And that's beautiful. That's lovely. That it builds who we are. Just think of like a diamond. Diamonds are made under pressure. Otherwise, you're going to be a hunk of coal, which serves its purpose. But, diamonds are made under pressure, and people are too. And you'll be all the richer for it, for being able to see your worth and to see the beauty that is you.
Oh, Erin, that was so beautiful. And I just really appreciate you just dropping into these topics and sharing so much. And it's just been really lovely to sit here and almost be confronted with that like younger self of mine who's kind of in the room of like would have really had a hard time reading the book but needed to read the book. And I'm just really grateful that you wrote it and that it's out there and people like me, like the younger version of me, gets to pick it up and see a hopeful story on the page. And that hope isn't just reserved when everything goes well, that the hope is there even when things are really hard. Because I think that that's a confusing message too when you're younger and you feel like, oh, I've got this stacked against me, so there's no hope. It's like, no, it's there. It's in the background. It's always humming. So I feel like this has been such a sensitive conversation for me, but a really, really good and much needed one. So we're going to go to the really easy part of the conversation now, where I turn it over to you to read your love letter, which I'm sure will not be emotional at all for us.
Oh, not at all.
Not at all. But Erin, I would love to just give you the floor. Okay.
Absolutely. To the woman holding this story, I don't know what brought you here. Maybe it was grief, fresh and aching, or quiet and long settled, the kind that still lives in your bones. Maybe it was a love for Scotland, or for romance, or for a good story, or perhaps the hope that somewhere between the pages you may feel a little less alone. What I do know is this: if you're here, it's not by accident. This story was written for the woman who has learned how to keep going while carrying loss. For the one who's been strong for so long that she's forgotten she's allowed to be soft. For the one who's grieved not only death, but the ending of friendships, love, or places that once felt like home, and wonders if that wound has changed her too much to ever feel whole again. I want you to know something clearly, gently, and without conditions. You are not broken, you're not behind, and you're not asking too much by wanting more out of life. Grief doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. It's not something you can outrun or bury. It is something to face, to carry, and to learn from. And when you do, it will not always consume you. It will shape you into someone deeper, braver, and more tender than before. This story believes in you. I believe in you. I believe that you deserve kindness and gentleness, a love that does not demand shrinking, that healing is not linear, and courage does not always look like grand gestures or sweeping tales of bravery, that choosing yourself again and again is not selfish but sacred. If Heather's journey reminds you of your own, I hope it also reminds you that you're allowed to take up space in your healing. You're allowed to want joy again. You're allowed to want yourself and to accept love from others, not as a reward for surviving, but because you have always been enough. And wherever you are on your journey, I'm glad you're here. And when you close this book, I hope you carry the one quiet truth with you. You're worthy of love that meets you where you are, love that stays, and love that doesn't ask you to be whole first. With all my love, Erin.
Erin, thank you so much. What a beautiful love letter to follow a really beautiful book. And I'm just so grateful that you were here today and shared so much. I can't even put words together, so we're just going to laugh about that as I'm trying not to cry from your letter or your book and just be where we are. But I think I'm just going to lean into it. I think the listeners know enough that this is a good space to be in. And I hope people listening, if what we talked about resonated, get to pick this up. So I always like to dedicate a little time and space to where can people find and get in touch with you? I know it almost sounds obvious, like we're all on social media, but we all kind of live on different platforms. I will put links in the show notes, but if someone is really resonating with your work or wants to learn more, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm most active on Instagram. My handle is at Erinn Maxwell Writes, and Erin is spelled with 2 N's. You can DM me. I also have a website and all of that, and all the good ways to contact me. You can find it on my link tree via my Instagram.
Perfect. And like I said, I'll make sure to put that in the show notes. Erin, thank you so much for being with us. I just had the most beautiful conversation. Younger me is thanking you for writing the book that I needed when I was 20 years old. And I hope I get to talk to you soon.
Absolutely. I hope the same.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to follow, rate, and review this podcast on your favorite listening platform. You can find me on both Instagram and TikTok at Love Letters and Books. And if you're interested in being a guest on Love Letters and Books, suggesting your favorite author, or just want to write in an original love letter to yourself or someone else to be read on air, please send me an email at lovelettersandbookspodcast@gmail.com.